Hey, Scandalized listeners, Charlie and Jackie here with a really exciting announcement.
We're doing our very first live recording of Scandalized at Podfort 2025. We'll be live at the Boise Contemporary Theater on Thursday, March 27th at 4 p.m.
Jackie and I are each going to bring you a fresh scandal and break things down from an expert lens, just like on the show.
We'd love to see our amazing listeners, so bring your friends and come talk scandals with us.
That's Thursday, March 27th at 4 p.m. from the Boise Contemporary Theater. See you then.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Jim Goddard. It's Idaho Matters. There's a new study out that looked at which diet will help you live longer. And tuberculosis in India is on the rise. It's alarming officials there. And there's a really weird story about how getting bit by a tick could make you allergic to red meat. It's Wednesday, time for our Doctor Roundtable with Dr. David Pate, former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the book, Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. If you have a public health question, send us an email. It's idahomatters@boisestate.edu. Dr. Pate, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Sure thing, Samantha.
Okay, I want to start off with this study that we're hearing about in the news. It was published in Nature Medicine. It was a really long study following more than 100,000 people over 30 years. Tell me about this study. What did it look at?
Yeah, so this was a study of more than 105,000 participants, lasting for lasting for 30 years. And what they were looking at is, were there any associations between their diet and those who achieved what they called healthy aging? And what they meant by healthy aging was that you lived to at least age 70 and that you got there without any chronic diseases.
Ooh.
And what they did then is to compare these different diets to see if some of them might be more associated with achieving that healthy aging.
And the AHEI diet led the pack, and it was the, quote, most strongly associated with healthy aging. I don't know if I know this diet. Do we know this diet? AHEA? What is this? Or EI?
We do. This is those initials stand for Alternative Healthy Eating Index. And so this is a diet that rates 11 components of the diet for things that are considered healthy eating. So it gives ratings to things that would favor vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts. But one of the things that was different about this diet compared to some of the others they compared is this one did allow for moderate alcohol intake, and that's been a subject of going back and forth about the benefits or harms of alcohol.
Gotcha. And according to the study, this AHEI diet had an 86% greater odds of achieving healthy aging, like you said, reaching age 70. And then there was another diet that was at the bottom. And there are a bunch of diets in here that they looked at. But I want to look at the one at the bottom. It's HPDI. What is this one?
So that one is the healthful plant-based diet. And that is a diet that emphasizes having vegetables and non-meat sources for your diet. And so that no one's confused, this diet still conferred benefit towards healthy aging. It's just that it was not as strongly associated as the former diet we talked about, the AHEI one. And probably one of the differences, main differences between these two diets is that even though this one is plant-based, and we do now believe there are a number of health benefits associated with being plant-based, it allowed for starchy vegetables. And for those of us here, we all know that largely includes potatoes. But it also allowed for refined grains and for fish and seafood, even though it tended to be more plant-based, but it's still more kind of like a pescatarian diet. And it did allow for sweets and desserts and things that we know are best taken in moderation. So there are some subtle differences, but both conferred a benefit towards healthy aging. It's just that AHEI was the strongest.
Gotcha. And you mentioned fruits, especially in the AHEI one, and that was really big in the study for living longer, especially things like berries, along with leafy greens, dark yellow vegetables. This kind of sounds like what every school kid is taught. Is this validation of something we pretty much already knew? We should eat our fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, that's a great point, Samantha. This is not shocking, but this is certainly really strong support for what we believe for a long time. Many of us our age can remember when we started seeing fruits being marketed with cereals like, Fruity Pebbles and all. It was because we all had this growing sense and some evidence that fruits conveyed benefit. Now, I'm not sure Fruity Pebbles is the best way to get that, but nevertheless, there are antioxidants and various vitamins and other nutritional values that you particularly get with fruits that do seem to be correlated with this healthy aging. And then, as you pointed out in your comment, although vegetables are in general a very important and good part of the diet, that you can even make it healthier by, as you said, leaning towards those leafy green vegetables as well as the dark yellow vegetables. So I think bottom line, not all vegetables are created equal, but vegetables in general are good.
And there was bad stuff, trans fat, salt, meat, and, sorry folks, liquor. They were all associated with lower odds of healthy aging. Again, a lot of what we already knew, although, as you said, there was some there's been some back and forth about booze. But what's your biggest takeaway from this? And I should say this study gets really in depth about some of the things in the diets. And of course, we're not talking about cancers or genetic factors or any things like that. This is primarily about, diets and healthy aging. What's your biggest takeaway from a study like this?
Yeah, I think this was very helpful in terms of helping us make the best advice for our patients based on what we know now. And I'm confident we're going to learn much more. We're already learning a lot. But I do think that what we want to do is to emphasize diets that our patients can comply with. So, there's no sense in me taking you, who loves to have the occasional steak or what have you, and tell you you need to be vegan. That's probably not going to work. But what would be good advice for you and for all of our other patients is, try to keep it in moderation, and then really try to emphasize making sure you're getting fruits in your diet and especially berries, but also vegetables. And the more you can go towards being plant-based, it does seem that there are a lot of health benefits. As you said, there's I think nuts have been underrated, and they have a strong correlation. Legumes, which over the past decade I've gotten better about eating. And I think those are very healthy. And then this issue of alcohol still remains a bit undecided. We for a long time thought that the good advice is for people to have one drink of wine a day. And really more recent evidence has really called that into question. And now the question that needs to be answered is whether alcohol really has any health benefit for you whatsoever. It's a matter of debate, but I think we're getting more and more evidence that, we don't really want to be pushing the alcohol part of the diet thing.
Gotcha. And we'll post a link on our website if you really, really want to nerd out and find, if you're on one of these diets, find out, what it looks like. It is very intense, though. So if you're going in there, keep that in mind. I want to switch over and turn to an article about tuberculosis in India. According to this article and this investigation, India has 26% of all the TB cases in the world. There are over 2 million people in India infected. Remind us what TB is real quick, and then let's talk about India.
So TB is one of those ancient infections that we can find evidence going way, way, way back. It's caused by a bacteria, particularly a mycobacteria, that is generally inhaled by being exposed to somebody with tuberculosis that is active. And what it does is it gets into our lungs. And for a lot of people, our immune system is able to contain it. And so we may not be symptomatic, but our immune system is usually not able to get rid of it. So it kind of stays there. And then if we get sick, if we real sick, if our immune system is compromised, then it can emerge and be a really terrible disease. I have also seen cases where it spreads to other parts of the body and can cause real mischief. Tuberculosis is a disease that we have managed to keep at relatively low levels in the United States. We have not been able to eliminate it like measles and some of those other things. And even though there was an effort to try to do so, and it is a worldwide infection that actually now is one of the top causes of death across the world. India has a disproportionate share, but we find TB throughout the world. And frankly, what a growing problem for us is tuberculosis resistance, where it's taking far more expensive and combinations of medications to treat it. And I fear this is going to get worse because of our withdrawal from the World Health Organization and the USAID programs that help get these medicines to contain the infections in various countries, because this is a problem that is even more problematic in third world countries. But as we've talked about many times on this show, those people still travel to the United States, and we travel to those countries, and it's going to continue to be a big threat.
You mentioned India has a higher caseload. Why is it so prevalent in India?
So it's several reasons. One is where you're going to find tuberculosis in its highest levels. Now, tuberculosis can infect anyone, so I don't want somebody to think that anybody is necessarily safe. But if you're really looking for it, you're going to find it in places where people are crowded together, and particularly poorer areas of the country, areas where they have less access to healthcare and less access to these medications. So there are plenty of places in India where there is very condensed housing, overcrowding, and they don't have very good access to healthcare and medications. We see it here in the United States as a particular threat for things like homeless shelters and other places like that, where we would have people that aren't getting access to good healthcare and are crowded together. But India did make some progress towards our kind of worldwide effort to try to get TB under control, but they let off the gas. And of course, most countries now, after the pandemic, the COVID pandemic onset, they have stopped paying as much attention, and a lot of patients have been getting less attention or even interruption of their treatment. And that's going to be a really big problem for all of us.
Well, and in this article, the Indian government had said that they were going to get rid of TB by 2025. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anybody believes that's going to happen at this point. What's being done to try to stop the disease in India, if anything?
Well, yes, they had that goal. I don't think anybody thinks that's reasonable. I think that if we had worldwide cooperation and set out a reasonable goal, we could get there. But what it takes is you have to identify those people that have it but don't realize they have it. So most of us that are our age remember when we were younger, we used to get TB skin tests and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking for it. And so that because it's pretty easy to treat if you catch it at that stage, but that's a good way to get those levels down. And then plus, while you're doing this, you're looking and finding those that have active TB where they're coughing, they have abnormal chest x-ray, where they're actually the ones that are transmitting tuberculosis. And Samantha, you'll remember Jim and I talking, I think, just a few months ago about a case of tuberculosis that was in one of the schools, public schools here in the Treasure Valley. So, those are all situations where this can be passed, but you have to go looking for it. Then when you find it, you have to make sure that these folks have access to the medication. It's not cheap. Usually the treatment is many months, and depending on the particulars of their disease, it's not uncommon for them to have to be treated for a good part of a year or more. And the problem is, how do you make sure these people are consistently getting the medication, taking it consistently, and not stopping it? Because that's when you get resistant strains.
Well, and I know I remember reading, and this is for those of us in the U.S. who think, oh, we're never going to have to worry about TB or even think about it. I remember reading about the biologics that are out there. When your doctor is going to put you on a biologic for a chronic disease or illness like an arthritis or something like that, that you have to get a TB test beforehand.
Well, that's right, because when you take those medications, and there's plenty of medications that can do this, that are intended or have the unintended effect of weakening your immune system, that situation where the previously healthy person had the tuberculosis in check so that they didn't realize they were infected and nobody else realized it. Now you impair that immune system. Now the tuberculosis can flourish. And so that is the problem. Is there's a lot more tuberculosis in the United States than we know about, because there's all these people that have this, what we call latent form of it. But those are people that, given aging, medications, underlying medical conditions, that could tip over to becoming an active case and then infecting other people.
Dr. Pate, topping the list of the weirdest things I have read all week, and I read some weird things for this job, has to be this story about how getting bit by a tick can make you allergic to red meat. And I have to say, this story scares the heck out of me because I don't eat red meat very often, but I do really like it. And the idea of becoming allergic to red meat never even occurred to me. Tell me how this works. What is going on?
Yeah, so one more reason for a plant-based diet, huh?
Well, no. Oh.
So this is describing a condition that I think we first recognized it maybe around 2010, if my memory serves me. And basically, what this is you develop antibodies that trigger an allergic response to a type of sugar that is going to be present in mammalian meats. So we're talking about beef, pork, lamb. In one case, I don't know why people are eating rabbit. I guess maybe I shouldn't complain if I haven't tried it, but that has set it off. But that hadn't occurred to me to try. But what happens is we have found this association with certain tick bites, that when the tick bites you and injects some of its saliva, there is a chemical that is very similar to this sugar in the meat. And what happens is you're mounting a immune response to that tick saliva that will cross-react with the meat so that you can then develop a allergy to red meat. And now that doesn't happen in everyone or even most people, but we're not quite sure just how commonly it occurs. We've got estimates that over about the time period since we first recognized this, about 2010 to 2022, so 12 years, somewhere between 110,000 and maybe 500,000 cases. But remember, there's 330 million people in the United States. So it's not something that I think you need to lose sleep about. What we did used to think is that it was mostly an issue of those that got bit by the Lone Star tick, which is really not here in Idaho. It's down in the southern and eastern parts of the country, particularly. But what has recently come to light that triggered the article you saw was that it's now been determined that deer ticks can transmit this, and certainly we do get the western deer ticks in this area. So it is a possibility. I frankly haven't seen or been contacted by patients or heard from my colleagues that they've picked up many of these cases here in Idaho. So I don't know that we're really having an issue here. You certainly don't need to worry about it. But in a percentage of people that do get these tick bites, they will develop this sensitivity.
Well, and to that point, not in Idaho, but there was a woman in Washington state, which is right next to Idaho, who got bit by a western black-legged tick, and then she ate red meat. Her throat swelled up. She almost died. And it sounds like this is one of the more severe reactions to, if I'm saying this right, alpha-gal syndrome.
You got it. Yes, that is a more severe. That is not. If you get this alpha-gal situation, it's not going to invariably lead to what happened with this poor woman. And you're right, she's in a neighboring state, so certainly it could occur here. And probably we're not recognizing all the cases of this either. That there's probably people that have it that haven't been recognized. But what more often would happen is people noticing that they're getting indigestion, abdominal discomfort, maybe even nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea when they eat red meat in the weeks following getting one of these tick bites. Certainly that Washington case is a more extreme case. That's not the usual, but it certainly can, because it is the part of the immune system that's reacting is part of the allergic system, the system that can include anaphylaxis type reactions, which is basically what she was having.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Dr. Pate, when I was growing up, the worst thing we heard about from a tick bite was maybe getting Lyme disease. Not that isn't bad, but this alpha-gal syndrome, say I got it, will I have to swear off red meat forever?
There is a good possibility. There are some people that this appears to be a minority, that if they will just avoid those sources of mammalian meats for a protracted period of time, their immune system will settle down, and then it can be reintroduced in their diet later. But that appears to be the minority. And so usually the recommendation for people with alpha-gal syndrome is they avoid these mammalian meats ongoing. Certainly, probably a good idea to consult with an allergist to determine. To my knowledge, this is not one of those things that we can desensitize you for, like with allergy shots. I'm not aware that that's an effective measure, but an allergist can certainly follow the levels of IgE that you make to alpha-gal, and hopefully if we see those levels come down with you avoiding the meats, then they can consider whether it's prudent or not to maybe try to reintroduce it and see if you can tolerate it.
And, maybe the ticks are trying to get us to go to that plant-based diet and stay away from the meat and be healthier.
I think that is one of the latest conspiracy theories, Samantha, that the ticks are rising up against us.
And we've come full circle. Dr. Pate, thanks as always. It has been a joy.
My pleasure.
And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.